Hello guys, welcome back to our channel and welcome back for another lecture in the subject matter Introduction to Criminology. Today's topic will be the methods of measuring crime. So we are going to be talking about the different way of how criminologists are able to measure the rampancy and existence of a certain crime, and that would be also in relation to the topic crime is statistic. Okay, so without further ado, let's proceed to our discussion. So in today's lecture, the learning expectation from the viewers will be at the end of the lecture, we should be able already to define what is crime is statistic, as that is one of the major topic that we will be talking about today. And also at the end of the lecture, we should be able to appreciate the significance of crime statistic in the field of criminology. So we have two goals in this lecture. Sit back and let us learn about the topic that we'll be talking about today. So first topic, what is crime statistic? Basically, crime statistic is defined as the collective data that describes the characteristic and rampancy of crime and also the biography of criminals. This is how I define crime statistic. We have crime statistic because we wanted to understand the existence of criminality and understand the behavior of criminals in and also their motivation, most likely their motivation, why do they commit crime, and the causation that we are been talking about so far in the previous lecture that we had related to this. So crime statistic is a collection of data, as we have stated. These data are coming from different agencies of the government in charge of monitoring the peace and order of our country, as well as the existence of criminality in every community. So that would be the primary duty of the justice system that our country had formulated in order to come up with plans and with programs in order to eradicate or at least minimize the existence of criminality. And for them to do that, they have to come up with a study to determine the current data that is present in our country relative to the existence of criminality. So this topic will bring us now to the question, what is the significance of crime statistic in the field of criminology? I mentioned some already, so we're just going to talk about them one by one. So we have listed at least three importance or significance of crime statistic in the field of criminology. The first one is in order to support or refute the existing criminological theories. So far, in the previous lecture that we had, we mentioned of a lot of theories already that tries to explain the existence of criminality. There are some theories that I mentioned that are no longer applicable in the current situation that we have. And I made mention also of some of the famous theories, criminological theories that we had in the previous centuries that tries to explain the existence of criminality that were already been debunked because of the existence of up-to-date study that tries to understand or, they try to test the validity of the conclusion or the generalization made by those theories. So we have the example, the theory of Lombroso regarding the atavism. The atavism talks about the possibility of a born criminal, or in this specific theory of Lombroso, he made mention that criminals are born. So there are predictors that can be used, physical attributes basically, that can be used that will help us understand or predict the behavior of that person when he grew up. So according to Lombroso, there are those individuals who have these atavistic features, such as possessing pointed nose, pointed ears. So those are physical attributes that Lombroso tried to correlate to criminal behavior. But as I've stated, these types of theories were already been debunked by a lot of studies that has been conducted, especially by Charles Goring, I believe. He was the person that disproves the existence of physical attributes in relation to criminality. So he concluded that you cannot identify criminal behavior by looking at the physical characteristic of a certain person. And he conducted a study on to that matter in order to disprove the previous theory that believes or that correlated the relation between physical attributes to criminality. So data collected through crime statistic is somewhat used in this matter. So I would give an example to this in relation to the study that we conducted during our undergrad. We have studied or tried to prove the significance of labeling in the criminal behavior or the behavior of a certain group of individual. During our time, during the time that we were conducting this study, the theory with regards to labeling had already existed for so long. So just an overview with regards to labeling, they believe that if you label a certain person negatively, there is a higher tendency that that person will try to adapt what is being labeled into him and will act according to his label. So if we're going to label a person as criminal, as thief, as a killer, so there is a chance that this person will adapt the label that being thrown upon him and will act as he is being labeled. So this labeling theory believes that if we're going to label a certain person as killer through extended period, he will tend to adapt that same label that being accused to him. So that's the just an overview with regards to some of the notion presented by the labeling theories. Now we wanted to identify whether is there really a correlation between labeling to criminal behavior. So we selected a group of individuals who will be the subject of our study, the respondent of our study, and tried to conduct a survey to try to identify if they had experienced being labeled negatively by the people that surrounds them, and did that label cause them or contributed to their criminal behavior. By conducting that study, we are either trying to refute or strengthen the notion that were presented by the labeling theory. So again, that's one of the purpose of conducting or collecting data relative to criminality and criminal behavior. It will help in either refuting or supporting theories that had previously existed already. Sometimes they are established theories or newborn theories. Okay. Another significance of crime statistic to criminology is in order to develop an up-to-date crime prevention strategies or program. The characteristic of the study of criminology is dynamic because crime and criminals develops over time. So the crimes before are no longer the same crimes that we are observing nowadays. Or during the early period of criminology, when people had started already to study the nature of crime and criminals, there are no crimes like cyber crimes and other contemporary crimes that are already present today. Perhaps there's a transnational crime before. So crime evolves. That's the point. Crime evolves over time. Criminals evolves over time. So without trying to develop an up-to-date crime prevention program, the crime prevention program that they had formulated long time ago can either be useless already or it will provide little help already if we're not going to upgrade those crime prevention programs. By conducting a study with regards to the contemporary crime that we had today, we are also trying to evolve or update the crime prevention program that we had formulated already long time ago. So with that, it is very important that we try to study the existence of crime day by day as it exists. As crime evolves into something, the crime prevention program that we are formulating should also evolve in the same manner as crime and criminals are evolving. And this discussion will also relate into the next significance of crime statistic to the field of criminology. And that is, of course, to facilitate or anticipate changes that may affect the functioning of the criminal justice agencies. So when we talk about criminal justice agencies, these are the agencies that has function relative to crime prevention or suppression. So they are either the law enforcement pillar, they are the prosecutor's pillar, the court, the correction, and also the community. They are the five justice pillar that we have in Philippines. So these agencies are involved in trying to negate the effect of criminality and trying to suppress the existence of criminality in our community. Crime statistic gives them a deeper knowledge with regards to the crime that are existing in our society. And with this also, it will help them to come up with possible changes with regards to how they function as an agency, as a pillar in the criminal justice system. And it will help them also to come up with a future plan in dealing with the existence of criminality. Since I mentioned that the crime statistic will help these agencies to facilitate changes that probably had a tendency to exist in the near future, and also to anticipate what are the possible changes that may appear in the near future relative to criminality. So all of this proves that crime statistic is indeed a very significant topic in the field of criminology. As we are dealing with crime prevention, understanding the nature of crime, the causation of crime, the reason why criminals commit crimes, and other matters. This is the lifeblood of all of these activities that the criminology profession should be focusing at. So it is very much important that we focus also on the crime statistic, and we try to understand and take advantage of all the data provided by the different agencies that collaborate with each other in order to provide a better understanding to the nature and existence of crimes and criminals. Okay, so we're done with regards to crime statistic. Now let's talk about how crime statistic is being collected. We're going to talk about the methods of measuring crime. So there are a lot of methods utilized by the different agencies in order to come up with the data that they have, and to come up with the conclusion and the result that they have in the field of criminology. But basically, we're just going to be talking about the three basic methods that are being used in order to understand the existence of criminality and in order to gather data relative to crime statistics. Okay? So we have here three methods that we will be talking about in today's lecture, and they are the survey, experiments, and then we have the case study. So what are the difference between these three methods that I mentioned? Let's talk about survey first. Survey is usually being used in order to understand the existence and nature of criminality because they are cost effective. They are effective in a manner that the data that are being collected are coming from either the person who had experienced criminality, who had encountered criminals already. So they are being collected or gathered, the data are being gathered directly from those individuals who had personal experience relative to the existence of crime and nature of crime. And also, in my experience as a person who sometimes conduct research relative to criminality and criminal behavior, survey is usually the first step that I'm using in order to understand in order to have or formulate conclusions, or in order to understand the problem that I'm asking in relation to the issues that we are encountering in our field. Let me just cite one of the research conducted by one of our students. Their study was focused on determining whether addiction, gambling, or addiction to gambling has something to do with increasing the potential of those individuals to engage into criminal acts, especially property crimes. So we know for sure that addiction will have the mutual relation to criminality. Whatever the addiction is, whether that's that is relative to drugs or that is gambling or other types of vices, they have a mutual relation to criminality. Meaning that there is a high possibility that when a person experiences addiction, he will tend to develop this antisocial behavior or criminal behavior. However, this group of students wanted to prove that indeed there is a relationship between criminality and gambling addiction. So what they have conducted is to formulate a survey questionnaire that tries to get the opinion of their carefully selected respondents. The respondents were focused on the community and the person who had gambling experience already. So they wanted to determine if there is indeed a relationship between gambling addiction to engaging into property crimes. So what they had utilized is the survey method. So they formulated a questionnaire, and those questionnaire was distributed to the respondents, and the data were then collated with each other and had come up with a result that indeed the respondents agrees that when a person were engaged into, or when a person is into gambling or had developed gambling addiction, there is a high tendency that his behavior will be affected and will increase his likelihood to engage into criminality, specifically crimes against property. So those are survey method. Okay? The data are being collected from the respondent themselves. And what is being collected is the behavior of the person and their perception to the issues that are being raised in the study. Okay? The conduct of survey research has also limitation. So sometimes, there are instances where the result may be manipulated, or the respondents will not show honesty with regards to answering the question, specifically if they had biases in mind. So there are a lot of issues that might affect the integrity of the result of the research conducted through survey. But still, majority of the time, survey research is very much cost effective. So let's talk about the second method of measuring crime, and that is through the conduct of experiments. So the conduct of experiments is sometimes used in studies that has something to do with the science themselves, and in other field of the studies that are usually focused on the output of the study. So specifically in the field of medicine, in the field of science, and many more. However, in the field of criminology, where we are considered as social science, that we are focused on understanding the behavior of the society or group of individuals or individuals themselves into a certain issue, then the study of experimentation or the method of experimentation is sometimes faced with ethical questions. Who should we be studying? Since we are going to study the behavior of a certain individual, and in survey method, there's no problem with that because there are no manipulation, there are no psychological or environmental manipulation. However, in the field of experimental research is usually done with manipulating some of the variables of the study, such as, for example, the input. If you wanted to manipulate the input and try to see if this manipulation, if these changes introduced into these variables will affect the result, then that is considered as experimental. Let's talk about the study that I mentioned conducted by one of my students in research. They studied, or they tried to determine or get the perception of their respondents on how they view the relationship between criminality and gambling addiction. So that they conducted a survey study. So what if they're going to pursue now next level study wherein they're going to use experimentation in order to determine if the conclusion, if the data that they gathered through the conduct of survey is indeed valid, and can it be observed through the conduct of scientific inquiry. So what are they going to do? Maybe they're going to group their respondents into several groups and try to input some variable manipulation. So if we are going to input some variable manipulation, I think the best thing to input is indeed the gambling addiction itself. So we're going to make the other group as a gambling addict, and we try to observe if this input had affected their behavior relative to criminality. In conducting research, I don't think that would be ethical, that we are going to input, that the input would be in this manner. Such as, for example, the relationship between drug addiction to criminality. There is a claim that if a person is a drug addict, there is a tendency, or there is an increase in his tendency to commit criminality. So what would be the appropriate or the best way to prove that drug addicts will turn into criminals? So we are going to manipulate now the variables, such as one group, they are drug free, and the other group will be those with drugs, whether drugs of their own choice. So after dosing them with drugs, we try to observe if this variable manipulation indeed has a significant effect to the group of respondents that we had chosen. So if group A, those who are drug-free, did not committed any crime, while group B, the group wherein there are those with drugs of their own choice, had engaged into criminality. So there is indeed a significant difference between the result of these two groups, which will prove then that drugs and criminality has correlation, and indeed, it is possible that what caused them to commit crime is the drugs that were manipulated, that was introduced specifically into Group B. However, the ethical side of that study will always be put into question. In the early days of criminology, wherein they still have the freedom to conduct experiments to human beings, such as B.F. Skinner on his study on Skinner box, wherein they still have the freedom to try to observe or experiments on children. Nowadays, we cannot do that anymore because, as we have stated, we're facing ethical issues in using human being as a subject of experimentation. However, there might be other way on conducting experimental research without sacrificing the humanity of a certain individual and without sacrificing any life or any possible negative effect that will be produced by conducting experimental study in relation to criminal behavior. But then, though it's very much controversial, I believe that the result of experimental research is very much interesting, as it is very much on point, okay? Because there is a definitive proof that is being derived through the conduct of the study. Okay? So let's proceed to the next method of conducting or measuring crime, and that is the case study. In the case study is usually done by targeting a certain group or a certain individual and trying to observe the life course and study the life course of that group or of that individual. What is interesting in the field of case study is that all the aspect of the life of that person is being exploited. As we have mentioned during the early part of our lecture, that there is no such thing as one causation that produces a certain criminal behavior. Criminal behavior is usually a product of multiple factors that comes or combines with each other and produce that criminal behavior. And by conducting case study, we are exploiting or exploring all the possible factors that had contributed to the behavior of that person because we're focused on one group only. A famous case studies conducted was, we have the case study of the Duke family tree, case study of the Leacock family tree, case study of the Edwards family tree. And they have constructive proof because the life course of that family is exploited. I mean exploited in a good manner. All of the aspect of their life, of their family were studied, and a lot of possibilities or a lot of possible causation were determined through conducting that life course. However, as we had mentioned, its nature is very much complicated since we are dealing with not only a certain individual at a certain period, but then we're going to focus on the activities he had done and all the factors that may have contributed to his current behavior or to his current status. Case study is also very interesting way of gathering or measuring crime or predicting or anticipating criminal behavior. As we are gaining a deeper knowledge with regards to the possible or other factors that had probably not been encountered in the field of criminology by doing a case study. Okay? So those are the means of how criminologists try to measure and understand criminal behavior, criminals, and the existence of criminality. Okay? So that's it for today's lecture. I do hope you learned something. If you have questions relative to that matter, please comment on the comment section and I will try to provide answer as soon as I can. So that's it for today. See you guys on the next video.